brilliant guest for you, somebody I've been looking forward to talking to for maybe a year and a half now. Finally got a chance to get together with Jason. We're going to have a great show for you. We're going to talk about how to create an irresistible offer, how to craft the offer itself, how to clarify your ideal client, define the desired outcome, and how to articulate your unique methodology, which I think is something that's super important. And that's what we're going to get into today.
Welcome to The Recognized Authority, a podcast that helps specialized consultants and domain experts on your journey to become known as an authority in your field. Here is your host, Alastair McDermott.
Today's episode is brought to you by Website Doctor, which is my other brand alongside the Recognized Authority. Website Doctor is a small web design agency that focuses on creating websites for professional services, experts, consultants, and people in the B2B professional services expertise space. And in fact, that's where the Recognized Authority came from when I wanted to create an add-on or focus on the authority building part of the puzzle. Website Doctor still runs in the background, and we've been building websites since day one in 2007. In fact, I've personally been building websites since 1996. So been there, done that, and bought that t-shirt. So if you're looking for a website for your expertise-based business, then check out websitedoctor.com and schedule a call with me. I'd love to chat with you and see if it's a good fit. The link is in the show notes, or you can visit websitedoctor, all spelled out, .com. And now on with the episode. Jason Van Orden, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alastair. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
We had a really great pre-chat about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think, where we talked about what we're going to talk about. And I think that one of the most important elements in the whole expertise business is to actually create an offer that your clients really want to buy. And that's what you're an expert in. So can you tell me a bit more about how you think about how to craft an irresistible offer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to put an offer out there just to get crickets back. We have such limited time and resources to put into our business. It can be so disheartening to work hard on something you're hoping the world will like, just to find out that you missed the mark somewhere. So yeah, I absolutely have some ideas to help mitigate that issue. And so I have a simple framework that I use when designing an offer, an irresistible offer, one that you know that your audience is going to be eager to sign up for. And the number one thing, which might seem obvious but gets overlooked so easily, is who is it for, right? Now, let me talk a little bit about what I mean there. It's not just demographically who is it for. You might say, for instance, I had a client that I was working with, and he worked with videographers, right? And videographers as a demographic, that breaks down into so many different things. It could be hobbyist. It could be somebody who's a wedding photographer or videographer, somebody who is an amateur who wants to get to where they're doing commercial. I mean, we could just go on and on until we're drilling it down. So one of the most important things is not only to say who the audience is for, but what is it that they want to accomplish that you can help them to reach. And so it needs to be very outcome focused, your definition of who that person is. So videographers who are hobbyists, who have been in it long enough to start spending some money to get some good gear, and it's getting a little expensive, so they'd love to figure out how to make a little bit of money with their gear, so now they can invest that back into, and perhaps it'll eventually become a business, right? Or videographers who are already videographers doing work with clients, but they feel maxed out on how many clients they can work with, so they're looking for, how do I grow my business from here if I'm already overloaded working 60 hours a week and can't just take on more clients? So we got two different audiences, both that fall underneath videographers. So the number one thing is, who's the audience, and most specifically, what are the outcomes? So where are they at right now, and what are the outcomes they want to get to in the words, the language that they would use to express those things, this very customer-centric approach. And I one of the best things you can do here is have conversations with people and listen, and not go and say, hey, I'm thinking about making this course or this thing that, it's going to be this many weeks and this much price, and this is what you're going to get. What do you think? Because people don't often know how to give feedback on it. But it's like, tell me more about, when it comes to this, what would you like to accomplish? Where would you like to be? What do you see as getting in your way? Why is that important to you? What have you tried already? What hasn't worked well for you? What are you tired of hearing about, being told that you need to do? Why do you think you're still stuck with this particular goal? All those things, Now you can start building an absolutely irresistible offer on top of that. So that's number one thing. And number two thing, who is the person? What are the outcomes that they are looking to accomplish? And it looks like we're getting some balloons from my peace symbol or something, like, hey, restream thing. I don't know. Oh, you know what? I don't know if that's my FaceTime that's doing that, or because there was a recent, reactions is turned on. I'm sorry. Well, let's turn that off.
Awesome.
As fun as the balloons are, Apple, we don't need the FaceTime balloons going. Okay.
Yeah,
yeah,
well, that's the joy of live TV.
yeah,
So one thing I noticed there in what you said, so all of those are really open, non-leading questions, which is really good. So you're not leading somebody right to an answer. You're giving a really broad question there, which gives them great opportunity for feedback. And I have done this before in the form of asking for feedback, or asking to do an interview for research for a book. And so the idea is I'm planning to write a book at some point in the future, maybe 6, 12, 18 months, and it's going to be on this general topic. And I'd love to chat to you as research for that. And what I found is that people are very open to that specifically. People like to help for a book. And actually, one of the things that I mentioned to people who I reached out to is I'm going to credit everybody in the book who helped out. So you'll get a listing in there as well. And people like to see their name in print. So that's another way. So that's just one thing that I found useful in getting that language. Because I think one of the most important things that you talked about there is the outcome in the language that they use, because sometimes as experts we don't use the right language. We describe things in our industry jargon and our lingo, not the way that our clients are actually thinking about it.
Yeah, 100%. And the science has shown, it's called the curse of knowledge, that the better we get at it, the more expertise we get at doing something, the more we actually distance ourselves, sometimes without realizing it, from the nuances of what our ideal audience is thinking, and maybe how the market has shifted, or what are some of those fundamental things they need to understand and realize in order to see, it's like, oh my God, this is the offer I was looking for, right? And I want to point out that, so there's 4 things we're going to go over here, and I've named 2 of them, and we haven't even talked about what is the solution yet, which is often where people start, is either like, what's the topic of my course? Hey, I'm going to make a videography course. How does that sound as an idea, right? That's just like, that's not a strong place to start, as opposed to who's it for and the outcomes. The third thing, though, that is where we start getting the solution. I'm aware of who I want to work with most, who I can do my best work with, who I want to build this offer for. I'm aware of the outcomes and the language that they describe. And now you want to think about, okay, well, what is unique about my process or methodology of getting them from where they're at right now over the hurdles that they perceive being in their way, as well as the ones that I know as the expert that they don't know that they don't know, but they're going to need help getting past those hurdles, over those hurdles. So we're building a bridge over this gap to those outcomes that they want. And we want this solution to offer a new, if you will, like a new insight, a new hope, a new way forward. Because often when we are creating an offer for others, it's possible they've been thinking about doing this thing for a while, or they might have even tried working with somebody else, or tried other solutions that have been mentioned over and over again, or they're and they've got their own worries and concerns in terms of the fears of moving forward, the potential costs of moving forward, the risks of moving forward, of maybe failing at this or that or the other, and they may be carrying the baggage of some failed attempts, or being feeling misled by other people that they've worked with. It's like, hey, they made all these promises and I didn't get it. So you're up against that. It's not just showing them I've got a solution and I'm credible and good at what I do. It's like, hey, despite what's happened before, despite where you're at right now, despite your concerns about moving forward and having to deal with certain costs and concerns, what if there was another way? And I've got this other way. I've got this missing piece. I've got a thing that maybe a way of thinking about it or approaching it that you've not heard about before. So let me give you a quick example there. I've had a couple of clients who work in the mental health field, and they help people with all kinds of things, but one big one is anxiety and being an imposter syndrome and not being so self-judgy and critical, right? All important things. Now, we know about therapy is out there to help with anxiety. Of course, there's meditation that's been shown to help with anxiety. There's sometimes people, they need medication for a little while so they can implement some things, and then eventually they might not need the medication. Like, there's all these solutions. Now, all these different solutions. And some people, they're like, no, I don't want to take medication, or I've done therapy, but I've not quite gotten to where I want to go. So what is missing, right? And there's this, so the client that one of the clients I've worked with in this field very specifically offers services that use something called somatics. There's like somatic experiencing. So it's this very body-based therapy. And so there's this great message behind that of like, well, if therapy and some of the other modalities, or you've struggled to get meditation working for you, aren't getting you where you want to go, well, maybe there's this other approach, this missing piece of learning how to get into your body and experience your body, because our body, there's all this science now about how our bodies store anxiety, and we've got to learn how to like free this stuff up. So that's an example of this unique methodology, something, and it doesn't have to, it's not that, hey, she's the only one in the world doing that, but it's a methodology that not everybody in the market is talking about. And that for a certain slice of that market, they're going to go, oh, wait, I've not heard it put this way before. I wasn't aware of that. Or now I understand. I thought that was something else, and now I understand it better. Okay, now I'm leaning in. Tell me more. And then, so we call that the signature method. And the one key piece of that is that what is different about it, which I call the remarkability factor. But then the other pieces of that signature method are, well, what are the milestones that you guide people through on the way to achieving those outcomes? And we want those to be meaningful milestones that they clearly see how they connect to the outcome that they want, and they can, recognize and celebrate the progress as they're going along. And then you've organized that in such a way, it's like, hey, well, here are the steps or the pillars. Like, you could put it up there as like a diagram, that if you were talking to the ideal person and saying, okay, I understand you want to get here, but you're worried about these gaps, I think I've got something that can help you, that you could put that up on the screen and say, well, I've got my such and such method. It doesn't have to be method at the end, but like, I've got my scalable genius method. It's something that I use with clients to help them to create offers that scale without overloading their time and energy. So, you give that a name, you brand it, it becomes this thing that sets you apart. So this show's all about establishing authority. Well, one way to establish that authority and credibility, just like writing a book, is to say, hey, I have created a methodology here, and it's a methodology that nobody else has. Now, it probably pulls from things that some other people might, but this is your unique way of bringing together not only your perspective and insight and experience and expertise, but the best of what's out there in a way that works for the ideal person that you want to help to those outcomes. So that's the third piece, is what is your signature methodology, which incidentally spells out the curriculum. It's like, oh, okay, now you've got usually it's like, okay, now we've got the modules. Like, here are the different milestones or steps or pieces or pillars we need to work on. So now you've got modules of the program, the curriculum. So that's the third.
Can I dig into that for a moment? Because
absolutely,
I know that a lot of people who are listening to this or watching this are very smart people. They're experts. They also may be a little bit cynical about some of this, because they know that, in order to solve problem X, coming at this from I have a software engineering background, but coming at this from that perspective, they say, well, actually, the way that we solve problem X is through these particular steps, and that's how everybody solves it. So how can I call that my unique signature methodology when it's the same way for everybody? Has to solve this in the same way. That's something that's a circle I find, a square I find hard to circle, or the other way around. I don't know. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you think about that?
Yeah, sure. So there are a number of ways to set yourself apart from other experts who seem to be offering a similar methodology. So this client I mentioned, like, she might not be the only person, she's definitely not the only person offering somatic experiencing. Now, one way that she narrowed that in even more was to offer somatics. She was specifically working with women, and working with often working with women who were looking for ways to deal with all this like specific trauma from the past, and they've reached a certain part of their life, and now they're like, I'm realizing these things that I haven't dealt with are still affecting me adversely. Okay, so we've gotten a little more specific there. Now, other things that make her more specific is, like, if you come and take a somatic experiencing class from her as opposed to someone else, it's just going to feel different, because she's got different way of showing up, a different kind of energy, maybe, right? So then there's that piece of what I call resonance that is important as well, because some people are going to choose to, like, well, I like how you make me feel, I like how you make me think, or, hey, we're both parents, and so that creates a sense of shared meaning between us. Or and all those little bits and pieces add up to, like, what, you're the person that I want to hire to take me through this process, not somebody else, even though I could probably find somebody who does something similar. Now, coming up with that scalable methodology, or that signature method that has a brand name that you've given it, that's just one more piece to say, like, here, I've taken time to think this through and to plan something out and to organize it. And again, yeah, could somebody dig into how another expert's approach and start pointing at all the similarities, or but they're not going to do that. At that point, they're like, okay, they've gone through all these, like, okay, you're speaking my language of the outcomes that I want. You're giving me this new hope of moving forward in a way that I've not quite thought, in a different way than I've thought about it before. I'm vibing with who you are as a person. So there's that resonance there. Oh, it looks like you've really thought this through. You've got a process that you've guided other people through. And so I can trust that, you've got a proven container that I can come into, for the purpose of reaching these goals that I want to. So all of these things stack up to just start pointing the arrow at you of, like, well, you're the person for them. So again, it's not like you have to be, hey, I'm inventing the next iPhone and that's going to change the entire industry. Sometimes it doesn't matter, like, taking the time to figure out your voice around the thing and the language that you use around the thing and the specific population that you serve best related to that thing. And all of these things add up to, you're a unique solution for a segment of the 8 billion or whatever people in the world, and can make a great living and have a great impact helping that slice of the world.
There's three things I think are super important for having this. And so I'm a big fan of actually having this kind of signature methodology, because I think that, first of all, it shows that you're not approaching this in an ad hoc way. So, and smart people who are experts in their field can quite often rock up and just look at the situation and instantly know what the solution is. But our clients typically like to know that we're following some kind of process. So knowing that there is some kind of process there, even if the process is different, just there's the value of that. The other thing I think about this is that what we sell in terms of expert consulting, transformative services, is usually intangible, and it's usually quite transformative, which means it's quite risky. And because of that, anything that we can do to make it more tangible, to make it less invisible, helps, because it helps to solidify it in the prospective client's mind as, okay, there's a real thing here I can kind of latch onto. And then there's the third part is, if you brand it and it's unique, then you can actually trademark that, and it becomes IP as well, and you can you can make a whole you can make a whole intellectual property brand, a series of books or videos or training around that. So I think that, like, that's there are really solid reasons why you might want to do that. So I think that's a really important factor. And I still find it difficult to square that up with, well, look, the right way to approach this is the same way as 99% of other firms in this sector are doing, because, like, this is the solution. But maybe there's some unique angle that you can add on it yourself to just make it that much more unique. That's how I think about this anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's probably, I mean, even as much as, like, well, this is just the way to do it, I mean, usually there are different permutations of a path to get there. And in fact, I think it's really important to organize your methodology as frameworks as opposed to a formula, because, like, for instance, I've got a framework for helping people to design and launch and fill a group program, right? And it could be argued there's just one way to do that, but still, my approach is just going to feel different than somebody else's approach as well. Like, for instance, I put a real focus. I'm not the only one who does this, but one thing that I do put a focus on that others who teach us don't necessarily do is doing some really proper customer discovery at the beginning of the whole process. So we really, which is one of those things I was talking about, we really extract the right language and double check our curse of knowledge against what we're assuming we want to create, right? Now, I'm not the only person who does that, but it is one thing. And I have my own approach to doing that. Now, that's just one of, 20 pieces or 30 or whatever of my entire process. But everything's broken down into frameworks because different people show up with different resources, different amount of time, maybe slightly different goals of why they want to create the course. And I want my process to be able to work for each of them, right? And so some people show up and they've got a really good grasp of who the audience is and what they need, but they don't know how to organize what's in their head. So we zoom in more on that part of the process and spend more time there developing their signature method. But not only, is it a little bit different from what others do, but even within your own offer, you want there to be some of that flexibility. And not that it's like, oh, I can help this person over here as well as this person with a goal that's completely on the other end of the spectrum, but that there's still that flexibility if the goals vary slightly, or people are at a slightly different place when they come into the program. And so it's like, yes, there's a methodology, and because like you said, it is important, people want to know that you've thought it out. And I can also say, look, we're going to build this on a foundation that has, that 80% that's the principles that have been proven. And me seeing, my 20 years of experience and me seeing what's working today, et cetera. And then there's that other 20% that's got to be based on who you are and your vision, your values, your strengths. You're a great facilitator. Awesome. Your program's going to look different than somebody who's maybe not as strong at facilitation, but maybe just excels for whatever reason at making like specific tools that make the process smoother. So it's also like baking your strengths into it. I love doing my programs as group calls with facilitation in a certain way, and then other people, like, that might not be the way that they like to show up, so their offer might be delivered in a slightly different way. So all of those variables, when you put them together, that's why it ends up being like, oh, well, this is going to be a very different experience working with this person through this offer as opposed to somebody else through their offer.
Yeah. Okay, I want to recap a little bit. So we're talking about creating an irresistible offer, and so we need to figure out who we're targeting, and that who in terms of what is the goal or outcome or transformation that they want to accomplish, because it's not just who in terms of demographics. We need to nail that down. And then we're talking about figuring out, so what is that desired, so who they are, what's the desired outcome, and then putting our own unique methodology and framework around that. Is there anything that I've missed in that summary that we've talked about so
no,
far?
that's a great summary. Those are our three things so far. The ideal client, the outcome, and the signature method.
Is there a fourth one in that list?
Yep. So the fourth one now is, what is the experience you're going to wrap that in and deliver it with, right? So on the one end of the spectrum, you could have something like, I'm just going to make this as a digital course that people can buy when I'm sleeping at night, go through at their own pace, and hopefully get the outcome. Now, I think we all know that there are a lot of things where somebody going through a digital course on their own is not an efficient path to transformation and change. It can work really well for some highly specific things that you want, like if somebody, I don't know, if you had a client who's like, hey, I need help while launching my it's like really specific digital course that's going to walk them through the tutorial of here's how to get your email list set up and online. Hey, that might work great. But it's like, hey, I'd like to have help procrastinating less, or writing my book or something bigger. It's like having access to you and others is going to be critical to actually reaching that outcome. And so on the other end of the spectrum is higher access to you, and that could be the point of you're working with them one-on-one, and it's very bespoke. Now that's very time intensive for you to be all the way over on that end of the spectrum, and so it's about finding what is that middle ground, again, given your ideal client, the outcomes you're delivering, your strengths and stuff. So I break down the experience into a few different variables. So there are three pieces of this puzzle. How do they get access to you and support from you, or from team members and people, because some people have programs and they've taught, they've trained other coaches to be able to also teach their methodologies and whatever. So how do they get support from you or the people that are, representing you? How do they get access to each other? Is it, we've got a Facebook group that or is like, hey, we meet regularly and, in a mastermind type style, or I facilitate connections in this way in the group. So how do they get access to each other? Because that's a key piece of value and support that can be through an offer. And then how do they get access to, and then how do they access the information and the knowledge and the tools and the training or any of that might exist, right? So is it delivered live? Is the training done live? Or is it like reverse classroom style where it's like, hey, you're going to go watch this module, walk through everything, fill out some worksheets, and then come show up live, and that part's synchronous, and we discuss what you've done and the in-class start part is discussion and questions and feedback and things like that. So there's a lot of variables that you can tweak there. And inside the access to you piece, you need to be thinking about, is this a done for you offer? Is this a done with you offer? Is this a do it yourself? So do it yourself is the whole download the digital thing, and I'm just going to go through it on my own. Done with you is kind of this middle ground where there's more support from you or the group or other things like that. And then done with you can also be a one-on-one, or done for you is like, hey, they're hiring you to write the sales page, to go write the book, to create the website or whatever. But that's not as much the kind of offer that we're talking about here. But it's important to keep that in mind. And the type of person you want to work with, what are they looking for? Because there's some people like, I don't want to be part of a group. Just give me the tool and I'll do it. Or some people like, no, I want to work with you one-on-one. I don't, so you need to know, going back to the customer research and stuff, what is it that they're looking for in terms of the experience? So that's the piece of how do you deliver it. And I just one more thing I want to point out there is like, we separated signature method and the experience, because when you've organized your knowledge as a signature method, and you've got all the pieces of the puzzle, well, now you can slice and dice that method for different offers or deliver that methodology in different formats. So what I mean by that, for instance, you could have hey, come work with me in this group offer for 6 months. I'm going to take you through this process from A to Z. Or it could be hey, you know what? This is a 3-day intensive weekend version of this that we're going to take you through. Or it could, right? But it's all the same methodology. Or you could say, hey, I'm just going to take off this one chunk here, and I am going to turn that into a digital course that people can go through. And then there's other options to continue through the methodology otherwise. But it becomes so much easier to rapidly create or test different offers, or to tweak them, or to serve a couple different types of customers that you might have, if you think about those variables as two separate things: the signature method and the experience that you deliver it through. And so that's the fourth piece, is what is the experience?
So let me ask you then, where does pricing and branding and marketing copy come in? Like at what point do you I mean, I'm guessing it's after you figure out what all the details are, but how does that fit in the mix for you?
Yeah, so typically when I'm working with clients on this, once we've got those four pieces at least at a high level figured out, then we can start attributing, like putting a price on it. And the price, I mean, two of the biggest variables for the price the biggest variable is, what is the value of that outcome to the ideal client that you're helping through this offer? So often it ends up getting priced on like how much stuff they're getting, or how many calls there are, or how much of my time they get. And sure, that might be in there, but look, if you can give somebody a solution that's worth to their life or business, several $1,000s in the coming months or year, and you can deliver or take them through it in 5 minutes for some reason, like, who's going to complain by that? They're gonna be like, awesome, great. Like, they don't care whether it's 5 minutes or 5 hours, or 5 months, if you can get them to if you can still get them to the goal. So the pricing starts coming in after we've gotten a little clearer, especially about the experience and well, I mean, those four variables all together help us point to the price. And then, we're thinking about messaging and marketing as we go through. I mean, we return to the customer discovery to see the kind of language that they're using. We want to make sure we use that language inside of our marketing. We return to, I mean, one of the key pieces was, okay, well, what is that remarkability factor? We want to make sure that that's infused into the front end of the messaging. Or hey, if people don't quite understand that my solution, like if they don't know what somatic experiencing is, well, I need to meet them where they're at first. And the messaging that I'm hearing is, I'm worried about anxiety, but therapy's not doing what I need. And so it's like, okay, we got to meet them there. The language has got to be the content that we use to attract an audience at the front of the customer journey. The positioning that we use for this offer needs to meet them there. And then the customer journey can kind of take them through the rest of understanding, well, here's what maybe you didn't realize about solving this problem. Here's another thing to consider. Here's why you might be struggling with this so much. And let me present to you the solution that I think is best for what we're talking about you're trying to do here, so that by the time you do put the offer in front of them, they realize, oh, this is the solution that I've been looking for. But yeah, the marketing and sales aspect of it are influenced by those four things. But those are, if you come and take my course, for instance, like the first half of the course is all about those four things, and then the latter half of the course is let's nail the marketing and the attraction and enrollment piece of the puzzle.
Right. Can you dig into remarkability for me a little bit? Just tell me how you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So remarkability factor is so going back to that idea of when you're trying to reach a certain audience, you've got to get through that jadedness or that yeah, that lack of potential self-confidence that they have with where they're at, and that all comes by saying, well, I've got this other approach that maybe you haven't thought of. So some good ways to arrive at that. This is when I'm working with clients on this. What we'll do is, based on the customer discovery and also based on what they just understand from working closely with people over time, we start asking things like, okay, well, what are the main obstacles that they think are in their way, and how does your offer, can it immediately remove those and make them non-issue, or mitigate those obstacles for them? So, for instance, if okay, I've got another client that I'm working with who helps men who are, often in tech and stuff, and really smart, but communication skills, relationship skills aren't quite there. They're socially awkward, and they're having trouble connecting with women, having relationships. Like, they want that so badly in their life, but they're not sure how to arrive at it, right? And so if he just comes out and like, hey, I'm going to help you, land those second dates and that dream partner in life, and so like they're thinking, yeah, but I'm socially awkward. I don't know what to say when I talk to women. I hate going on dating apps, and I don't want somebody else to tell me I need to go on another dating app, right? So, but if his remarkability factor is like, hey, without having to go on dating apps, even if you're socially awkward, in fact, we're going to show you how to turn your nerdiness into a superpower, because there are aspects that are fascinating to women, or feel safe, or like you don't need to be like what you see the typical, oh, this is what's going to attract women, in order to find the person, particularly that you probably want to reach, right? So it's helping them see, it's like, oh, okay, despite where I'm at and what I think is holding me back and what I've tried that didn't work before, there actually is hope for me to move forward here. So identifying those obstacles and how your offer and signature method can mitigate them is important. A second one that's important is like, okay, I call those the obstacles, and then there's the overstays. What are they tired of hearing? What are they tired of, like, everybody saying they got to do? And they're like, I don't want to do it that way. I tried it and it didn't work for me. Or it's just like, that's not my style. Or what if that, right? And so, like, there are plenty of people who might have nutrition goals, whether that's to like change their energy or to lose weight or whatever their goals might be. And they might be like really tired of being told they need to go on a low carb diet. They're like, look, I like that, just, it's not sustainable for me. So what's the other way forward here? And if you have so like, in fact, I have a client that's in this space, right? And one of the unique things that we're focusing in on is a lot of people don't realize the role that cortisol and stress is playing in preventing them from moving forward, right? And so that's where we're coming in and saying like, hey, maybe there's this thing you haven't thought of, and if we attack that, it's going to open up this new level of possibility for you to move forward towards the goals that you want. So, so what are the obstacles? What are the overstays that they are tired of hearing of? And so, like, what's that different approach that you can offer? So those are a couple of them. There's other things we can go into. I mean, another thing I say is like, to my clients is like, what's really upsetting you that keeps getting said and you don't think is serving people well out there in the marketplace, and how can we use that to position your offer opposite from or different from what everybody else is saying you got to do? If you're in a business, you're tired of launching to fill your courses and find clients, you're like, I'm tired of having to do these big launches every other month, it's exhausting. Well, then you're going to be really attracted to somebody who's like, hey, what if we could put together a way where, just in a more evergreen, authentic, natural way, you're just patiently inviting people month to month and bringing people in without having to do these exhausting launches. Come on in and I'll start showing you, laying out for you a path towards that kind of a reality. So that's what we're looking for in terms of the remarkability factor.
Awesome answer. Thank you. Now I have another question, and I'm gonna try and give some give some background to this. So I have seen it myself, and I know that other people have seen, where we're trying, the offer that we have is something that where we want to kind of we want to hide the mechanism, or hide what it is, until later in the sales process, because we feel like, I feel one of my offers that people are going to reject it instantly off the bat, and it's only when we talk about it that they say, oh yeah, that actually might work for me. um
Right.
So I don't know. Have I given you enough to work with there?
Yeah,
Or
I
do you
think,
think
I think
we can
so. And
dig
this
into it?
this is this is a key element that relates to a lot of what we've talked about. And it goes back to that mistake sometimes of talking about the solution too soon. And it's not that you're trying to like bait and switch people, right? But what it is like, there are times where like if you came out and just said, well, hey, I'm trying to think of a good example here. But what I hear you saying is like there's often assumptions or misconceptions, baggage that goes along
I
with.
can give you a
Oh,
very specific
okay, sure, yeah.
example, and that is one. So I help people in my world. I help people to build authority by creating content,
Mhm.
and I also help them to generate leads by starting conversations with new potential clients. And so one mechanism or vehicle I found to do that is to have them start a podcast. And so they're not initially thinking, I want to start a podcast. They're thinking, I want to build authority and I want to generate leads. And what I found is kind of, I actually came to this through the side door, that when I interview my clients, we create a video, and we can then repurpose, create lots of content out of that. That can actually make for a podcast episode. And then now they've got a podcast, they can actually reach out to potential clients and say, hey, I'd love to invite you on my platform and have a conversation with you. Would you be interested in that? And people like that as a, you're platforming somebody. But they're not thinking initially, hey, I want to start a podcast.
Yeah,
That doesn't go through their mind. And
right.
so I talk to them about the building authority and generating leads, but I kind of feel like I'm being a bit disingenuous because I think that, hey, we actually could turn this into a great podcast if you want to go down that route. But I don't really talk about the podcasting aspect up front. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I can understand why it can feel disingenuous. Now, part of it is just the human psychology of, yeah, if you were to say up front, hey, I'm going to help you start a podcast to get more clients, they immediately have ideas about what that means, right? And you haven't had an opportunity to say like, here are all these other ways that this can benefit your business. Here's how this can be easier than maybe you've thought of. Here's why I actually think that this is one of the most effective media that you can use for transmitting your message, to make that, stack that case up for them to go like, oh, well, I hadn't realized that or thought that before. Now, here's one key thing to keep in mind in this, and this goes back to that first thing, which is who's the ideal client, is making a decision of, okay, you could decide, okay, I want to work with people who they already know they want to launch a podcast. They're just looking for the right person to guide them through it with the methodology that makes sense to them. Now, that doesn't sound like what you're going for, but somebody could make that decision. Another decision could be like, okay, I'm going to go for the person who's like, it's crossed their mind to launch a podcast, and if the right case was made to them, they might go, okay, maybe that's something I should go ahead and prioritize, because it sounds like relative to these other things I might do, this is the one that's going to get me closest in a way that I would enjoy to finding new clients and having conversations with the right people and elevating my authority, et cetera. And then there's some people like that hasn't even crossed their mind because they might have these misconceptions about it, or they just haven't even thought about it before. They're adjacent enough to it in that, they know they need to be creating content online. They know they want to be reaching more people in an effective way that allows them in an authentic and compelling manner to communicate what they do so well and connect with the right people. And so if you can talk about that and then, say, hey, one of the best ways I've seen to do this is podcasting, now you've opened them up to what you believe might be absolutely the best solution for them. Now, here's where I think it would get disingenuous is when you start saying like, well, here's the missing piece, and this is absolutely why you failed before, and no wonder, and if you're missing out on this, then you're totally missing out. You better hurry. Like, it's like all that pressure and trying to, because some people, you'll get to that point in the case and they're like, hey, I learned a lot from you, Alastair, but I still don't think that this is the right approach, but I learned a couple things. Or maybe they'll still stick around until they're like, actually, now this is landing different. Maybe it is the right time. But there are some people who are going to be, I never thought about that. I didn't realize that I could stack up all these different ways of getting an ROI for my podcast. It's not just this, oh my God, I got to come up with an episode every week, but it's like, wow, this is an opportunity to reach out to people I might not otherwise have had the courage or reason why to reach out to them and connect to them, to invite them onto my platform. Like, so helping them realize some of those things then brings them to, and in the end, I'm sure you're still saying, if this is you and you want to do this and this and this and this appeal to you, this is the solution that I think. And at that point, the right people are going to go like, okay, cool. How can you help me with this? Right. And so, I think it's when we try to convince people that, this is the solution, rather than still honoring and allowing them to make the decision that's best for them in the end, while we're making our best case. That's the difference, I think, between being disingenuous, or applying pressure that just doesn't need to be there, to sell something effectively.
Yeah, I like that. And it's I mean, I came through the side door of I'm using the fact that I run a podcast, and I'm using those interview skills to help people to create content, because a lot of people want to create content, but they don't have time to sit down at a keyboard and start to type. But if you ask an expert the right questions, they can talk for hours about their expert topic. And so it's a great way to create content. And then I was thinking, well, actually, we can repurpose this back into a podcast, which then defeats the real problem of building authority, which is that it's a slow burn thing and it doesn't get you
Right.
clients straight away. Well, if we've got a podcast as a platform, we can invite our ideal clients on. And now we're actually dual purposing this, and now we're building authority and generating leads, which is what I found to be like the biggest barrier to building authority, is just how long it takes. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to compete with every other podcast production company who's out
Yeah.
there on the planet, because there's a lot of them.
Right.
And I'm looking for those people who are specifically looking to build authority. And
Right.
so that's the context that I'm talking to here. And that's why I kind of felt disingenuous, but I didn't even want to talk about podcast or mention the word podcast on the sales page for this. Can you see why
I mean, I think that's just smart. And it's not to say that, you don't, once you have them in, also bring that forward and say, hey, this is where we're heading. And, give me if what I've said so far is compelling to you, give me a chance to lay out the rest of the case. I mean, you don't say those exact words, right? But, so, it's not like you hide it for them for like 2 weeks of content. You're like, guess what? Surprise, the magic strategy is podcasting, and they've invested all this time, and like, really, that's what this was. But,
yeah,
but
that feels like a bait and switch.
right. That feels like a bait and switch, but that you're just laying out, you're meeting one of the most important quotes in marketing and advertising, is always enter the conversation already going on in the mind of the customer. And that's from Robert Collier. I think it's from like the 30s. He wrote a book on advertising, a number of other things as well. But it's like, look, we need to meet people where they're at. We need to have that empathy that gets infused in, so that they see it's like, oh, you understand where I'm at, where I want to get to, what I'm worried about, what's getting in my way, and you seem to have something to offer that I've not heard before. So yeah, let me give you some like time and attention, so I can understand what it is that you're proposing here.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for digging into that as a kind of like a little mini case study for me. We've got 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So I want to ask you rapid fire. What is the number
Sure.
one tip that you would give to somebody who wants to build their authority?
The number one thing would be, which actually relates to what I think one of your other questions is, find your voice. And here's a great book to help you with that. Louder Than Words. I don't know if this is showing up backwards, but it's Louder Than Words by Todd Henry. It might be showing up backwards for people out there, but Louder Than Words by Todd Henry, harness the power of your authentic voice. And so often it's like, what does that mean to find your voice? Like, it's so important. It relates to that remarkability factor, showing up with confidence, so many things. And he actually has a good framework for helping you do that. Find your voice, figure out what it is you really want to say and what's different about it.
I love it. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. Well, Jason, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Jason Van Orden, for coming on the show. Can you tell people where they can find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So if any of this has resonated with you, you can I'm always on LinkedIn posting, so you can go follow me over there. I've got a newsletter there, or jasonvanorden.com. I've got a newsletter there as well. And I frequently do workshops where we dig into this stuff and actually take action on some of these different pieces. So if that stuff resonates with you, we'd love to interface with you in either of those places.
Awesome. And we will link to all of that in the show notes. Jason's LinkedIn is definitely worthwhile following. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great conversation.